There we go.
Go for it.
Hi, this is Harry Graham of the Tallahassee personal injury law firm of Barrett, Faiskin, Brooks, and we're joined again by our Sunday night law call guest, Reggie Garcia, a longtime lawyer and lobbyist here in Tallahassee, and we just wanted to go into a little more detail about some of the subjects we weren't able to address at length Sunday night, which of course the topic was lobbying, of which Reggie is a longtime bastion of the Tallahassee scene. And Reggie, we had previewed the show where we're going to talk about some of President Trump's comments about lobbying and draining the swamp, and we really didn't get a chance to talk to that too much. When he made that statement multiple times during the campaign, I assumed he was talking about lobbying in Washington and the fact that there's a lot of lobbyists, as we talked about on the show, and a lot of money, and that he was going to do something to try to either disrupt that system or to end it altogether, and using the colloquial draining the swamp. What I've seen since then is a number of Goldman Sachs executives on his transition team, and now actually in the administration itself. We have a billionaire as the Secretary of Treasury. We have a billionaire as the Secretary of Commerce. So I'm not sure what exactly he was alluding to, and if he was alluding to trying to lessen the influence of lobbyists in Washington, what do you think? What do you think the reality is as we sit here almost 2 months into the new administration?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and we hit on this a little bit at Law Call, and it's great to have a little opportunity to expand on it. First of all, I think the president, who was out there for 18 months, and frankly, I think has been thinking of doing this for a long, long time.
I think so.
He sensed and connected with a lot of Americans, particularly folks that frankly never recovered from the 06 and 07 recession.
Correct.
Who were not just Republicans but Democrats and independents. I think it's been somewhat oversimplified that these are rural voters. Certainly there's a concentration of those. If you go the back way from Tallahassee to Tampa, which I do, and drive through the small towns and before the interstate,
Sure.
That was the only way to get around. I don't know that I saw one Hillary sign in Dixie County.
Or Levi County or Gilchrist or some
yeah,
others,
Dixie, Levy, Gilchrist, Taylor.
Right.
And why is that important? Well, I mean, those are the areas south of Tallahassee, to an extent west of Gainesville and Ocala, and north of Tampa Bay, where thousands of retirees from all over the country work, but also just good old-fashioned hard-working Americans that went to high school, maybe have some college, maybe didn't go to college at all, but who were just good, hard-working men and women, and for whatever reason, Miss Clinton and the Democrats didn't even get to resonate with those people. So draining the swamp, I think, reflects a real frustration, mainly with voters across middle America, and what I mean by that is middle income America, who have been somewhat left behind and think the Washington system is rigged for insiders.
Right.
You mentioned Goldman Sachs. That's not in and of itself anything wrong. Secretary
Right.
Clinton, Secretary of the Treasury, Mr. Rubin was from there. The Secretary,
President Clinton.
Yes. Excuse me.
Robert Rubin.
The Secretary of Treasury under Bush was from there. So that's a mega
Sure.
worldwide investment bank with a lot of talented people, and just because they come from there doesn't mean they're lobbyists, and doesn't mean they won't do a good job. But drilling down, I think you had mentioned the research shows there's 9,500 federal lobbyists.
Right.
It's been a long time since I've done much federal lobbying work, but have from time to time do that. Most of those folks are subject matter experts
Right.
in very niche areas:
Right.
utility regulation, telecommunications, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, etc., etc. The legal profession has very talented people up there. So the president did three things. Most significantly, if you have been a registered lobbyist the last 2 years, for a client and now work for the White House or an executive agency,
Right.
you're barred for 2 years, or what we would call Chinese walled, from handling any of those issues. That's a good thing. What was previously the 2-year bar under President Obama and his predecessors, I believe now becomes a 5-year bar. That
Right.
if you join the administration, you can't lobby the department or agency you worked for 4 or 5 years after you leave. That's a good thing, and I think a reasonable sacrifice for people. And then a lifetime ban for any of those folks, as I understand it, from representing foreign governments. And in and of itself, that sounds nefarious, but every country has a congressional agenda, an executive
Right.
agenda, and they have lawyers and lobbyists and subject matter experts who interface with their countries. Some are allies, some are not, who are trying to interface with the administration, usually on trade issues, usually on budget issues, sometimes on immigration issues. But I don't know, it sounds good, but I don't know that he's necessarily doing it.
Right.
And time will tell. He's only had
Right.
2 months. The real issue, the other side of that, is do lobbyists have unfettered access to him and his senior staff and cabinet secretaries?
Right.
And I think only time will tell how that plays out.
Right. So you don't believe that K Street in Washington is going to be drying up anytime soon? With,
No, I
the
think it will
lobbyists?
get bigger, frankly, because very few people thought President Trump would win.
Right.
And the people that bet wrongly on Secretary Clinton are now trying to frankly staff up and add people to their team who have relationships with the president. Brian Ballard from Tallahassee, a
Right.
longtime friend of mine,
Right.
and friend from law school, both is building a very big building, a $15 or $20 million building downtown here.
Yes.
Brian has been the lobbyist for the Trump Organization in Florida.
Right.
So the Trump Organization, with all their vast holdings worldwide and a concentration of them in Florida, are smart enough to know that they need advocacy and they need representation, not just at state government and local government. But Brian is now open to Washington office, I think mainly to do international affairs and Central and
Right.
South America type issues,
Right.
and has put together a team of 5 or 6 veterans and professionals in D.C. to work on that. So lobbying is a good thing, not a
Right.
bad thing when it's done well.
Right.
I joked on the show the other night that it might be the world's second oldest profession. What do I mean by that? Amendment 1 to the U.S. Constitution and to the Bill of Rights says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, most people know that, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, press, and the right of the people to peacefully assemble. And of the 5 protections, the one that's least known, the last sentence says, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So our founding fathers, of course, because of the England experience,
Absolutely.
said government is not always going to get it right, and
Right.
government may be the problem, not the solution. So elected officials, we need access to our elected officials and policymakers through what became to be known as lobbyists. Some are citizens and community activists. Many are hired guns, if you will, lawyers and non-lawyers, who are just educating policymakers
Right.
on the impact of proposed legislation, and that's a good thing.
Right. And it really is somewhat ironic that even though lobbying can have a bit negative connotation over the phrase high-priced lobbyist, as you point out, so much of this comes from our experience with the British, who we got a lot of good things from, the common law and really just the notion of a relatively representative democracy, but so much that went into our Declaration of Independence and certainly into the Bill of Rights and the Constitution as a whole was a result of the abuses that we suffered, like the right to trial by jury. That's right in the Declaration of Independence, because it had been denied to even many Americans who were British citizens at that time. And so this was part and parcel of that. So actually the founding of lobbying came from a very transformative and very good experience for the United States of America.
Yeah, and honestly, what is also a little known secret is the elected officials themselves have a priority agenda for their districts and their states, and they frankly lobby their colleagues and each other.
Certainly.
But the timing is good here. We're in mid-March. We are ending the second week of what is normally a 9-week legislative session
Right.
here in Florida.
Right.
There are some predictions that this session will go a little bit longer to work on budget issues, but only time will tell. So there are 40 state senators, 20 are new, although most of those are former state House members. Out of 120 House members, I believe either 43 or 46 are new. So to our 20 million Floridians and to our immediate neighbors and friends here in North Florida and the Panhandle and surrounding areas in Tallahassee, this is a good time to monitor what the Florida legislature is doing and to reach out, personal meetings, personal phone calls, emails, letters, etc., on issues that are important to your profession, your industry, your community, and your family. For instance, Senator Bill Montford, who is our state senator,
Right.
also represents 10 largely rural surrounding counties.
Right.
Every one of those has a school board, a sheriff, a clerk, a tax
Right.
collector,
Right.
a city commission, a county commission, who all have their own legislative agendas. So I tease kind of Senator Montford's staff, who's got very capable professionals. I just don't know how they handle the sheer volume of all of the requests, not just policy issues, but most importantly, budget issues that are important to all of those 11 counties, including Leon. They will all be part of a process the next 6, 7, 8 weeks of crafting an $83 billion budget.
It's pretty significant. Well, we are the third largest state in the country, aren't we?
That's right.
Pretty amazing. Well, Reggie, thank you very much for coming in on a Friday morning during this busy legislative session and talking a little bit more about our last law call topic. And we look forward to having you on again, maybe later in the session, where we can kind of see where some of these bills that you're working on with our senators and representatives, how they shake out, and with the executive branch as well. So,
And I'm a viewer and fan of this show, and thank you for what you all do, because you all are empowering citizens and taxpayers to know their legal rights, or at least to know the right questions when they believe they've got either an injury or otherwise an opportunity. Your firm and the show does a good job, at least, of kind of scratching the surface, and then they can avail themselves of other opportunities like your website, and then coming on in to ask questions to real